Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to meditate few minutes. After the meditation we have Dhamma talk and the question and answer. Right now Stephen Subodha is going to lead the meditation.
Let's get into a comfortable position. Close our eyes. And take 3 deep breaths. And now let us cultivate thoughts of goodwill, loving kindness, metta, beginning with ourselves. This is a sincere wish, a wholesome desire, a wholesome intention for our true and lasting happiness. We might think to ourselves, may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May I live with a heart and mind unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May I look after myself with ease. And then we extend our goodwill, our loving kindness to our loved ones, our family, our friends, our respected guides and teachers and mentors, all those that we love, all those that we admire, all those that we respect. May they be happy, peaceful, free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And then we extend our goodwill, our loving kindness to our acquaintances as well, those that we don't know so well. May they also be happy, peaceful, free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And then we extend our goodwill even to those that we have difficulty getting along with, difficulty respecting or admiring, even those that may call us enemy. May they also be happy, peaceful, free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And so it is in this spirit of admirable friendship with all beings that we extend our goodwill, our loving kindness in all directions. In front of us, behind us, to the left and right of us, above and below, outward into infinity, to all sentient beings everywhere. May we all be happy. May we all be peaceful. May we all be free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May we all live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May we all look after ourselves with ease. And now, with our hearts and minds uplifted with the metta that we have cultivated, let us now turn our attention to the breath. Ardent, alert, mindful, setting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. We bring our attention to our body, mindful of the breath coming in, mindful of the breath going out, being aware of the quality of the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. Paying attention, we see if the breath is long or short, deep or shallow. And we allow the body to breathe the way it needs to right now. It could be that the body finds deep breath the most gratifying, or perhaps shallow breath. Allow your body to breathe the way it needs to. And settle your awareness there, wherever it is in the body that you feel the breath most easily. Centering your awareness there. Do so diligently. Whatever thoughts of the past or the future, abandon them. Whatever fantasies about the world, about your life, thoughts that pull you away, let them go. Let this mindfulness of breathing be your sole occupation for this moment, allowing everything else to fall away for the time being. Think of it as a burden that you can set down for a time, allowing your mindfulness of breathing to be your only responsibility for now. Continue to meditate in this way for this time that we have together until you hear the bell.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Subodha, leading the loving kindness meditation. Right now, Subodha, you can start Dhamma talk. Before you start Dhamma talk, I want to say a few things about the Subodha. Subodha is coming to our temple more than, I believe, more than 15 years, Subodha?
I don't know. It's been a while.
around more 15 years, I believe. So he's helping so many ways, giving Dhamma talk, and presently he studies his PhD degree in University of the West. So Subodha, we really appreciate about your helping to temple. So you can start your Dhamma talk right now.
Thank you, Bhante. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. Last week, when I was thinking about what I would be talking about today, I was discussing it with some friends and my wife. And the whole reason we were at our friend's house in the first place was because of the fires that we've had going on ever since, was it last week, the week before? I don't know, all the days have been kind of blurring together. I know that we were there supporting friends who were affected by the fire. For the past 3 years or so, my wife and I have been going to this lovely tea house in Altadena called Callisto Tea House. And we became very good friends with the owners, Wendy and Nathan. And so we went over there to just keep them company. They said, well, you might as well. Our entire inventory from our shop is in our house right now. Why don't you come by, we'll make you tea. And so we were sitting with them and another couple who don't have a business in Altadena. They live there and they were evacuated. And so we were conducting serious business of being good friends and keeping each other company while some of them were going through something really tough. And then so naturally, given the situation we were in, I thought, well, maybe I'll talk about the fire. Then I thought, yeah, by the time I get around to today, meaning right now, probably everyone's sick of hearing about the fire. I should probably talk about something else. And then that's when my wife turned to me and she goes, it'd be really great. It would be so cool if you talked about our new baby lizard. Because the day before, we had gone to the Reptile Super Show in Pomona and gotten ourselves a baby calico chuckwalla. And if you don't know what that is, I'll explain in a bit. But we had just gotten it, and so I turned to my wife and I said, we just got the thing. Like, what am I going to talk about? And she goes, well, you can talk about lizards and like reptile brain and other stuff like that. And I said, well, I think there's probably a better lesson than that in there, which I'll get to. But my wife gave this little topic, like, here, talk about you and pets, as if that'd be something more uplifting than the fires. And I don't think my wife was really thinking about my history with pets. Sad to say, growing up as a kid, I had very young, inexperienced parents who were also inexperienced with animals. And so even now, I affectionately call my parents' backyard the pet cemetery. So I don't think she really knew what she was doing there. But, my track record with animals, just to give you a little sense of what it was like, my very first pet was when I was 4 years old. Luckily, this one didn't die, but the ones I'll talk about later did. My first pet was a baby bunny rabbit that I called Thumper because I named it after the rabbit in Bambi. And I only got to have it for maybe about a month. And one day I was talking to a neighbor girl that lived right next door in our little town home area we were renting, my parents were. And I just thought I was telling a friend something really cool. But I didn't know that as renters, we were not allowed to have pets. And so the little girl, I don't know, she probably went to her mom and said, hey, Steven next door's got a bunny, why don't I have a bunny? And I don't know what made the mom do this, but the mom informed the landlord, the manager. And my parents had to get rid of my bunny, and they thought they'd save me the trauma of having to say goodbye. So what they decided to do was try to take the bunny early in the morning before I woke up, except that I did. And I remember running to the window and watching my parents drive away with my pet bunny as I was crying. And that was my intro to pet ownership. And from there, it just got worse. One time, my father and I were at a swap meet, and we saw a little puppy. And I was probably about 8 years old. And my dad probably thought, hey, a boy and his dog, what's more classic? Let's get this guy a dog. And even though it was this tiny little cute Chihuahua mix whatever that I named Minnie because she was so small, my sisters were terrified of this dog. I don't know why. Every time they tried to go to the backyard, the dog would be curious and come up and want to say hello. And my sister, Jenna in particular, would scream as if needles were being pierced into her skin. And so I had that puppy for about a week or so, and then they thought, well, our daughters won't go in the backyard now. I think we got to say goodbye to the puppy. And they rehomed the dog. I don't know where it went. And then I had a turtle named Leonardo because I was a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And he was actually doing okay. I kept him in my room for a while, and then he got bigger, and so his container got bigger. And, you know, he's an amphibian, sort of. So my mom wasn't so big a fan of my room basically smelling like a pond. And so he had to go outside. And so then he was just living in the outside, whatever was happening. Eventually his shell got infected, and then the rest of him did, and then he passed away. And I could go on, but I think you're getting it. Not really all that great. And so I had a really tough time even wanting to have pets for most of my childhood because it just seemed to go wrong. I mean, and when it wasn't just with me, even if one of my other family members got a pet. My sister got a cat, I'm the one who found it ran over by one of our neighbors. My mom got a beagle, it's managed to escape through the fence and we never saw it after only having it for a week. And it just goes on and on and on. So by the time I was 19, I managed to pretty much make up my mind I wasn't gonna have pets anymore. I thought, you know what, this whole thing hasn't been working out. And by this point, I had managed to successfully keep a reticulated python for about 3 years. But I was like, you know what, I don't know. I'm busy, I'm in college, I work night, full time, I was falling asleep in class. The last thing I had the energy for was a reticulated python that needed a lot of care and was also getting really big. Because I bought it as a teenager, not knowing that reticulated pythons are one of the largest largest snakes in the world. So I managed to find a reptile enthusiast who could take care of him, and I rehomed him, and that was a good story, ended well. Someone who had the time, energy, and experience could take care of that reptile. But I don't know if you can tell by my youthful exterior, but 19 was 20 years ago. And so I haven't had a pet in 20 years. And it hasn't even occurred to me to have a pet in 20 years until recently. I don't know what it was, you know, like about a year or two ago, I was just thinking about how much I loved having reptiles. And I would talk it over with my wife, and she'd go, you know, you really should just go ahead and get one. Like, you know, you haven't had a pet in a long time. Like, she's had her cats, and she takes care of the cats. I also take care of the cats. I feed them and stuff too, pet them and everything. But I got them via her. They've always been her babies, and I've just enjoyed having them around. I've never had a pet of my own since I was 19. And so my wife was the encourager in this. She goes, you should really just go ahead and allow yourself to have a pet. And I thought, okay, what kind of pet do I want? And I thought back to my high school girlfriend and her mom, who had 5 giant green iguanas. And it was amazing because they just had a normal house, wasn't particularly big or fancy, and they also didn't have any enclosures. These were free roaming giant green iguanas. You walked in and it was like you were in Jurassic Park. It was quite amazing. And they just kind of had the run of the place, you know. My girlfriend's mom had managed to potty train the iguanas, so they'd actually go to trays with like newspaper and just do their business in there. It wasn't foolproof, they still had accidents, but like, say like 80% of the time, that's where they would go. It was pretty amazing. And then she'd have basking lamps all throughout the house, perched up in various places so they can kind of just go wherever they wanted. But I wouldn't say it was entirely safe. They're really big. They can get like 6 feet long, including their tails. They can be pretty aggressive. They like to climb things. And when they get hungry, man, I remember being over at my girlfriend's house, and I was probably like 17, and that's when I learned that some iguanas really like pancakes. And if you're in the kitchen cooking pancakes, you might just have a giant lizard climbing over you, trying to steal your pancakes. So I learned to just make a separate, very plain, unbuttered pancake that was just a little bit of bread, tear off a little piece, and give it to the iguana. But I did enjoy having iguanas, on my own, and then also through my girlfriend when I was in high school. And so I started thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool to have an iguana again? But maybe not something that's an iguana, because a lot of reptile enthusiasts, hobbyists will admit that they're one of the worst pets you can possibly have, because even when they like you, they injure you. They have really bad claws, they tail whip, they do death rolls. People have lost fingers. And so I happened to watch a video a couple years ago where someone was talking about a chuckwalla. And he goes in the video, this is actually the iguana you actually want. Because it is in the iguanidid family, but it's not an iguana. It has no spines along its back, no spikes or anything like that. It doesn't have that little flappy bit on its neck. And it's just like an iguana in the sense that it's completely vegetarian, which is something important for me as a Buddhist. I don't want to feed alive anything to it. And they're mostly really chill. They're really reluctant to bite, do anything dangerous. Their defense mechanism is to puff up like a giant potato and wedge themselves in cracks and rocks. They're entirely defensive in how they approach, so they're pretty easy to handle too. But they also form attachments with their owners and become real friendly. So I've now had one of these for a week, and I've realized, hey, I actually really do like having pets. But more than that, I started thinking about the hobby in general and what it means to be a pet owner of something like a reptile, which gets back to the conversation I was having with my wife a week ago, where she was like, hey, think about how reptiles are, and like they're silly little reptile brains. And I was like, well, I don't really think that that's the lesson, because I think it's far more important to think about the mentality and the temperament of someone who takes care of reptiles, because they are very, very different from the other kinds of pets that we typically keep. Especially if we keep anything like a dog or a cat. A dog in particular, dog being what we call man's best friend, has sort of evolved alongside us. Dogs are basically people. It's really cute. I love being around dogs because you always know what they're about. They smile practically, a lot of videos of dogs smiling. When they're sad, you can tell when they're sad. When they're sick, you can tell they're sick. You know how to entertain them. If you're in a real pinch and you don't have any dog food in the house, it's real simple to feed them. In fact, I have a great friend who spoils his dog by making homemade dog food for him. He boils the chicken, he cuts the veggies, he makes the plain rice, he mixes it all together. This dog eats better than I do. And so you have people like that who manage to live side by side with their dogs as companions, that they just understand each other through and through. Tell a dog to sit, it sits. Tell a dog to come and play, it plays. It'll be your best friend, it'll be right next to you. You can be there suffocating and a dog will like save you. In fact, I even saw a video where someone was on the floor, passed out, and a dog was jumping and on the guy and managed to like bring him back for a bit. And like, so once the ambulance came, he was fine. Like, wow, amazing. No snake or lizard has ever done that, I'll tell you. But the other thing about that is that when it comes to reptiles, they don't have any way of telling you if something's wrong. They don't smile, they don't pout, they can't cry or laugh. Whatever's going on with them, they do so very silently. A lot of hobbyists in the reptile world will tell you very, very adamantly that reptiles are good at hiding their pain. So that means that if you're going to take care of a reptile and you're going to be serious about doing it well, you have to be the kind of person that's really, really observant. You got to really be paying attention. You have to be really diligent. And you have to have the right kind of mentality if you're going to be the kind of person that handles reptiles. Not have them just be something pretty that's hiding behind some glass, but something that you can actually hold and have crawl around you. In fact, I haven't shown anyone any photos, but my chuckwalla currently likes to live on top of my head most of the time. It's really cute. I'll open up the enclosure and I'll just climb right up my arm and then onto my face and onto my head. So needless to say, that he doesn't seem very scared of me currently. But yeah, I think it's important to look at the kind of qualities that someone has to have and develop in themselves if they want to take care of something like that. Because it's something that can't tell you when something's wrong. You wouldn't believe how many times someone will have a reptile that they love, that they think they're taking good care of, and it seems to be responding well to things, it's still eating, it's still playing, it's still being handleable, and they'll go, hey, what's that weird black spot on his tail? And it turns out to be something like scale rot. And before they know it, they have a pet that needs to be amputated to save its life, right? Because the signs are that small. So to expand this to something that includes not just reptile hobbyists, but even the fires that have been going on recently, is the idea of what I would actually like to talk about today. So you can think of this as like one long introduction to something that's really important, which is that when it comes to this way of life that we're developing as Buddhists, we have to be paying attention to our lives to see the lessons there. And I don't mean this in some kind of like weird new agey way where like the universe is teaching you lessons and you just gotta pay attention, right? Maybe a little bit of that. If you believe that and that's a useful thought for you, I'm not gonna try to take that away from you. But I do mean it more in the sense of someone who's developing this path. You are living your lives, and your lives extend beyond a sutta that you've read, or a Dharma talk that you've heard, or a retreat that you've gone to. Because your life happens every day. And every day you have all kinds of experiences, you have all kinds of things that are happening, and you have your response to those things. What you think, what you say, and what you do, right? If it's taking care of a little life, a very tiny little lizard that's no bigger than the palm of your hand. And it's up to you to find the lessons there. You know, it takes someone with real determination and observation to find lessons in life. Because life doesn't present you with lessons. You have to seek them out. And that's what starts changing the Dharma into something that's not just memorized, not just a list of qualities, but something you bring into every moment. And so, as I'm looking at this lizard, the first pet I've had in 20 years, I'm realizing that I'm approaching it as not just a guy who wanted to have a pet lizard, but I'm also approaching it as a Buddhist, someone developing the path, trying to find the Dharma in every moment. So, what's the Dharma of having a lizard? And like I said, oftentimes it's learning how to be very quiet and very still, because most of the lessons that the lizard will tell you about itself happen when you're just sitting back in a chair and it looks like you're not looking at all. And the reason for that is because reptiles, lizards out in the world, are prey for a lot of things. Lizards out in the animal world are constantly in danger of being eaten up by wolves, coyotes, birds, all kinds of things. So a lot of the lessons they have to give you, the secret lessons, happen when you're just kind of looking out of the corner of your eye. Because if you look it straight at them, you kind of look like you want to eat them. So you learn the skill of stillness when you're around reptiles. This is actually why, even now, the Chakwala tends to like me more than my wife. Because my wife is good at a lot of things, but she's not very good at being still. And so I've been still with the Chakwala. And my wife, earlier in the week, was still staying with her parents, because not only was the fire stuff going on, but my mother-in-law broke her shoulder and had to have shoulder replacement surgery. So she was taking care of her mom, my wife was. And that meant that she was out of the house and our cat was out of the house. I had like 3 days just to bond with my little Chakwala friend. By the way, I named him Gojira after Godzilla. And we got to be real good pals. I would just leave his enclosure open, and when he wanted to come out, he was just gonna poke his head out. I'd put my hand up to him, he'd start climbing and hanging out with me. And then my wife came back, and more importantly, the cat came back. And seeing the cat and the Chakwala together was a great lesson in why, as Buddhists, we don't find the animal realm better than the human realm. Because there's some real Tom and Jerry nonsense happening now with the cat and the Chakwala. Because anytime that Chakwala moves in its enclosure at all, you would think that my cat was being announced that In-N-Out had just arrived, because that cat is dead set on looking at that lizard. Luckily, I'm pretty sure the cat thinks that it's more like lizard TV and hasn't realized that there's like any possibility of getting in the enclosure. It's a very good one. You can't really get in there. The cat can't anyway. So it's probably fine. But there's lessons there. My wife and I are learning how to be adaptable. How do we distract the cat? Perhaps we'll put cat TV on the screen, and the cat will start chittering at the birds on the screen so we can pay attention to our chuckwalla and so on. We're looking into getting a nice big, sort of like 3-story enclosure for the cat, putting it up against one of our windows in the kitchen. So it actually improves the cat's life, because now she has a safe way of basically just staring out the window all day, and we don't have to worry about her getting into any trouble. And she can look at all the beautiful birds we have flying around in Monrovia. We have great bird watching over there, by the way. And so these are just a few examples of the kind of lessons that you can find in your own life. And you can, if you want to, turn them into Dharma lessons. Learning how to be still, when to be active, how to be observant. And you really can apply all these things to your mind, right? Every one of us can find value in learning how to be still. Every one of us can find value in learning how to be observant and to be diligent and to want to do things well. Because any kind of animal husbandry, in the examples I've been giving, really comes down to learning skills, right? Learning how to do something well. Anyone can do it. And that's also the same way I like to approach the path that the Buddha laid out, the Eightfold Path, as skills that we can develop, qualities that we want to have, qualities that when we develop them lead to a better life, not just for ourselves, but for others. And when we do this well, and we really dedicate our lives to it, we find a lot of healing there. And so by approaching my new hobby as a lizard owner, I'm doing so as a Buddhist, and I'm finding healing in that. Because I honestly think that if it wasn't for the Buddhism I've been practicing for all these years, I would have been still too caught up in my anxiety, in my doubt, in my fears about having pets. Because honestly, my childhood in terms of pets was tragic. I've only told you the bare minimum that I needed to get my point across about how bad it was being around people who didn't know anything about pets and didn't really take precautions. And as a child, not knowing better and watching animals that could have had full and wonderful lives cut short with illness and things like that. So it was a big leap to decide to get back into it. But I think it's a leap that I was able to take because of the kind of confidence I have in my abilities from developing these kind of qualities. I've said before that, when I was younger, I didn't feel like someone who was trustworthy because I often would do things that would end up hurting myself and hurting others, which is a common enough story. But as I've developed in the path, I finally came to a point where I felt like someone of integrity, someone who really does things for my own welfare and happiness and the welfare and happiness of others. And that doesn't just extend to people that I meet, although it does, but it also extends to the various pet friends that I meet along the way as well. And so now I feel like the kind of person who can do this well because I have developed these skills, because I know how to be observant, because I know how to be diligent and to pay attention, and because I can try to always find the lessons there. So even when I make mistakes, I've learned something valuable. For example, earlier this week, I wasn't sure if the temperature was right in the enclosure. I turned on another bulb that was basically way too much UVB radiation and was wondering why my chuckwalla was hiding all day. Because my chuckwalla was telling me, without any words, without any crying, without any complaint, "Hey, dummy, you're cooking me." And once I turned off the light, all of a sudden the chuckwalla was out, friendly, accepting food from my hand. And you need to be able to pay attention to see that kind of stuff. All the more so when it comes to the Dharma lessons that we apply when we look at the mind. Because the mind is tricky. The mind likes to lie to itself. So like the lizard that hides its pain, our minds hide defilements. Our minds hide hindrances. Our minds hide our greed, our aversion, and our delusion. And so we have to be observant enough to find them, seek them out. And we have to be skillful enough to provide the proper remedies to those things we uncover in ourselves, so that we really can free our minds, free our hearts, and be people of integrity in our day-to-day interactions, not just for ourselves, but for others. So that's my short and sweet lesson that I thought of in thinking about my chakwala, which again, I've only had for a week. Maybe in a couple of years I'll have some enough to write a whole book on the Dharma of lizards or something. I don't know. I mean, if someone can write the Tao of Winnie the Pooh, I think I can manage something on lizards. But yeah, even now I'm finding ways of applying the Dharma to my life in ways I would never have imagined. If you had talked to me 20 years ago when I thought I would never have a pet again, I didn't think, you wouldn't have been able to convince me back then that it would be the Dharma itself that would get me back to chopping up squash and bell peppers for a little lizard. But here we are. So that means that for yourselves, likewise, you can look at your lives and see what's going on, and you'd be surprised where you find the Dharma when you're really paying attention. It's something beyond what we find in the meditation hall. It's something we find beyond the books. For those who are truly observant, the Dharma is all the time and all around you. Lessons that you can apply to ease your suffering and your stress. So, I think I'll end my talk there. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Subodha. If you have any question, any comment?
Yeah, we're really fortunate today to have quite a few people here. This is a tiny little temple, so when we have this much, it's kind of a treat. So if there are any questions or comments or thoughts that you have, anything related to the Dharma or anything I brought up, or even anything that's not related to what I brought up, but something that's really inside you that you need to express or seek advice on, this is the perfect time. I always think of this one story in the canon every time we have a Q&A, where the Buddha is literally right there on his side, dying, and he's the Buddha. Wow, this is one of the greatest teachers, if not the greatest teacher in the world. And there's all these students around him that can be asking him questions, and he even says, hey, anyone got any questions? I'm on my way out. And then they go, no, we're good. And then once he passes away, there's a bunch of other questions that come up, and everyone's trying to figure out how to run the Sangha and everything. So I'm not saying there's any pressure like that, but I will say you never know when you have your chance to ask something that might be impactful. So if you have something that you're kind of shy about, ask anyway. It might help. So that's my thought. Yeah.
As you're driving here in the morning to come and meditate, is there any signs that you should open and be aware about that can help you to get better into a state of meditation? And because what I like to do, sometimes look at the homeless people and count my blessings. So I'm asking, is there any signs to help you to get into a better zone?
I would say that when you're traveling to a temple or a monastery, don't think of it as separate from the temple or monastery, right? And what I mean by that is that the same qualities you're trying to develop sitting here in the hall, you came this morning for our meditation service. We do, it's always from 10 to 10:45 every Sunday, where we do some meditation together. When you come here to do that, you go, great, you have your 45 minutes or so of meditation, but what about the way here, So yeah, you can, if you want. I don't recommend full-blown meditation. I've said this before, you gotta look at the green lights and red lights and all that. But certainly you can already start that process of observing your mind, right? Because really that's something we should be doing all the time as students of the Buddha anyway, right? That was actually one of his first lessons he gave to his own son when his son became like the first novice monk, which is like, hey, Rahula, like, what is a mirror for? And Rahula says the mirror is for reflection. He says it's the same way with the mind, we should constantly be reflecting, right? So it's the same idea. Like, as you're driving along, if you see something that you respond to like that, we're like, oh, I'm seeing someone who's really in need, like that should engender thoughts of goodwill, compassion, things like that. Good. And if it makes you think thoughts of gratitude for your own welfare, like where you are in life, good. That is the kind of stuff that we should be doing, right? But maybe sometimes we're driving along a nice windy road and it's not busy, and you have to remember, like, I don't only go to city temples. I also drive out to some that are kind of out in the sticks, and you see other kinds of lessons, right? I'll give you an example. One time I was driving to one of the wilderness monasteries that's out in the hills, and you don't see anybody. It's just a big winding road going through hills. But that means you can really see pretty far away. And I remember I was looking out in the distance and I saw a bunch of crows that were like picking at some roadkill. And then the car would come by and they'd all fly off. But then the moment the car was gone, they'd come right back to the roadkill. And then another car would come, they'd fly off, and they'd come right back to the roadkill. And I was just thinking, like, wow, look how persistent they are. Like, they're really into this. And then I drive up and see where the roadkill was, and it had been run over so many times. All it was a smear on the road. It wasn't anything. You couldn't see any bits of anything. So they were literally coming back just to pick at this smeared jelly on the road, right? And I had one of those moments where I was thinking, like, that's actually what the Buddha's been getting at when he talks about the kind of stuff that we usually find as pleasurable. Earlier today during the meditation, you were bringing up, like, oh, like, what about hindrances? What about that? And we were talking about the joy and the pleasure of meditation as non-sensual. And what's sensual pleasure like? The Buddha would use examples like that. Like, what's sensual pleasure like? The kind of stuff we usually get all caught up in. It's like that smear on the road. And rather than realizing that it's disgusting and like giving rise to disenchantment and dispassion, we're like those crows, just trying to gobble it all up. And like, that's a gross example, but it's exactly the kind of stuff you see in the Pali Canon, because you need that kind of strong imagery to be able to relinquish your hold on the things that you think make you happy, right? One of my favorite people to talk to is an occasional guest teacher here, Venerable Sanata Bihari. And what I like to talk about with him is that we both remember what it was like to be like young guys living in LA. Him more than me, like, he used to party it up. And he'll be one of those people that will tell you, like, what he does now, how he lives now is so much better. The kind of happiness he has from following the Eightfold Path and living as a monk versus what he was doing. And he'd be one of the first people to look at that example I gave and go, yeah, you're right. When I was clubbing over in Hollywood, that was me being a crow eating that smear on the road, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that if you want to, you can think about as you drive. And it's certainly better than what most people are doing when they drive. It's one big long karaoke session or something. They're not even paying attention to the road. You have people who think their cars drive for themselves now, and they're really dumb on the road. So yeah, that's a much better use of your time. So I think that's, a very skillful way of approaching your drive to the temple, but I think it should be your drive anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Subodha, can I ask something off topic?
Sure.
We have a very young life here, being born in April, hearing the Dharma for the first time. And I'm curious, as Buddhists, what can we do to welcome our friends' babies into the world?
Well, one big practice that you see in most Buddhist countries is that once the baby is born and, it's like been seen by the doctors and then we know the baby's healthy, it's been like alluded to, a really big thing is its first visit to the temple. And like, that's a big thing. Like, you bring the baby and baby gets to hear the chanting and everything and like be around a lot of really cool meditative people. The monks might come and give like a special blessing to the baby and everything, and it's like a big deal, like, wow, the first visit to the temple. And so that's a really auspicious thing, like hearing the Dharma, like for any life form. Even for our pets, like it's a big deal that our pets like hear the Dharma. It's like, ooh, that's more indication that they're gonna like be reborn as a human and like get to practice the Dharma as a human. And so to be a little baby inside the tummy and get to hear the Dharma, that's often seen as a good sign too. It's like, hey, like, they're already hearing some really good, skillful stuff. They could be hearing, I don't know, Bridgerton or something instead. And they're hearing the Dharma. So like that's a really good thing. They say that babies, they might not know the words, but they get the feeling behind things. That's why people play like good music and stuff like that. So hearing some calm and hopefully wise-ish words, I think that's a great thing. And so once the baby's born too, you just keep doing that. Find gentle things for babies to do. All the stuff that we have geared towards a lot of young kids, babies to like 4 or 5 years old, it's like this, like colors and lights and craziness. I think poor Fred Rogers would be like rolling in his grave if he knew. Because I think that's the kind of stuff we need more for kids these days. Like more Mr. Rogers, Little Bear, like gentle stuff with like really good lessons about how to share and how to be kind and making some arts and crafts in the kitchen rather than having an iPad in front of them. I know too many iPad kids. So that's also really auspicious too. Less iPad kids, more Dharma kids. Yeah, so that's my input anyway.
Thank you. We are big fans of Fred Rogers in our house.
As we all should be. He's one of my role models. I love him. He was a Presbyterian minister, and his whole teaching on being a good neighbor was him finding a way to teach his ministry to others without being dogmatic. And so that's the same way I try to approach the Dharma as well. Just being an admirable friend is really what we're trying to get at.
Thank you, Subodha. We're going to chant page 4 and page 10. Before that, I just want to say one word regarding about the babies and the temples. I'm coming from Sri Lanka. In our countries, most of the people Buddhists, and at least around 70% Buddhists. So whenever baby born in hospital, the parents, before they go to their home, they come to the temple and bring the baby to temple, and monks are blessing for the baby, and baby doesn't know anything. Really doesn't know, but they want to come and have a blessing, then they go back to temple. That's, I believe, most Buddhist countries. All right, thank you again, and we will chant page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. When ye do konga do
Junga Sange Gai Kong Hai Pada Om Mani Padme
Thank you again. I think we have tea and cookies. A couple of announcements. Next Sunday, Reverend Chansara is going to give a Dhamma talk. Please come and join with us. And February 9th, we are celebrating the Chinese New Year. So a special blessing for everybody, and monks giving the gift for the lay people. So please come and join to receive your gift. It is red envelope. We don't know what it is inside. So could be some valuable thing. Anyway, it's a gift. So we have done for the monks. We are inviting for the at least 10 or 12 monks to come to our temple. And we have puja. We have somebody is going to talk a little bit about the Chinese New Year. Then after that, we give the special blessing for the people and the special gift also. After that, the monks having the lunch in Anand Hall, which is we call Dana for the monk. And so we do have different food, especially Sri Lankan food, Thai food, and Vietnamese food, veggie and non-veggie both. Please come and join.